Need link building or content? Go to fatjoe.com. On-demand marketing services for agencies and teams. Fat Joe.
Good morning, Brighton. First off, I have to say a huge well done to everyone for actually making it here bright and early today. By having a talk about actually doing less work, I was half expecting there to be a completely empty auditorium because people who actually want to do less work may still be tucked up in bed, or at least on a train today. So I'm going to start off by asking you a question, and the question is this: how many pages is too many pages to have on your site? Now have a think about that for a second. It is, of course, a rhetorical question, so just have a think about it in your heads. The answer is, of course, entirely personal, or it's one of those age-old questions where the answer is, it depends. And yes, it does depend, but it's something that I really want to get you thinking about today. Because chances are, you have way too many pages on your site, and that's making you work way harder than you have to. Now, to give you a quick overview of what I'd like to talk about today in the next 20 minutes or so, I want you to go away from here with a really clear view on why less definitely is more when it comes to the amount of content you've got on your site, what you can do to decide how much is too much content to have on your site, and how to go about reducing that footprint. Ultimately, you're here to understand how you can reduce the amount of work that you have to do in order to get the same amount of traffic or more. Sound good? Great, let's do it. So first, I want to introduce you to Snaptrip Group so that you can understand why this is such an important topic to me and the company that I work for. At Snaptrip, we advertise over 60,000 different holiday rentals from big-name brands in the UK and across the world as well. Now, behind me is a list of all of our websites. It's scary, right? That's a lot to look after. An SEO agency might look at this and see dollar signs, and no offense if you do, but me, I look at this and I panic, or at least I did on my very first day. But having lots of pages, lots of content, and lots of sites is good, right? Well, yes, it means that we can dominate the SERPs, we can look after lots of different niches, and we can target lots of different keywords that perhaps we wouldn't be able to if we had just one website, for example. But by having this much content, this many sites, this number of pages, and actually doing a good job of it is a huge undertaking for anyone, and let me tell you why. So a really big issue that we're all facing at the moment is resource constraints, because regardless of the number of people in your team, there's always more to do, right? There's always more content to create, there's always more links to generate, more internal links to create. You've got to monitor, you've got to report, you've got to optimize all of those pages, and you have to keep everything updated too. It's likely you just don't have the right number of people, the amount of money, or the amount of time that you need to keep everything optimized. I actually worked it out once. So when I first started at Snaptrip, we had something like 5.1 million pages and a full-time SEO team of just me. That worked out as being able to work on each page for about 5 seconds a year. And that's pretty scary when you think about it. Luckily, the team doubled in size in my second month, and it has grown again since then. But when you think about it like that, it's mad to think that you can spend your time making sure that each and every one of your pages is fully optimized. Another one of the issues that we faced was cross-site duplication. So when our sites were first created, we had thousands of thin pages, and that meant that we wanted to duplicate the content across each of those sites just to save on copywriting resource. But obviously, we know now that that was limiting our visibility, because we were competing in the very saturated market of travel, but we were also competing with ourselves. I would get called into meetings to be asked why one of our keywords has dropped in rankings, only to discover that another one of our websites had actually taken the top spot. And you can bet that I breathed a sigh of relief when I worked that out. Not only that, but our competitors had a huge opportunity. They could change one thing on their site, and all of a sudden they could overtake the rankings of all of our sites, and that was really scary. Another issue that we faced was keyword cannibalisation within our individual sites. So it wasn't uncommon for us to do audits and discover that there were 3 or more pages that were all targeting the same set of keywords. So on one of our sites, Late Rooms, for example, everyone remember Late Rooms? Woo, woo. We had pages that were targeting hotels in London, budget hotels in London, cheap hotels in London. And yes, those were 3 completely separate pages. But obviously, they had the exact same user intent. So if we didn't know which ones to prioritize for optimization, how was Google going to know which one to prioritize in their search results? So it ended up that none of them performed particularly well. What about crawl budgets? So how many of those pages that you've created is Google actually seeing or actually crawling? And how many is it finding valuable? Now, we could enter into a debate about whether crawl budget is actually an issue for us. Obviously, it could be server problems. It could be the fact that the content is just poor quality. But if we were struggling to know which ones to optimize, how was Google going to keep up? Or how were other search engines going to keep up too? When we looked at our coverage report, we discovered that there were thousands of pages that Google had just decided not to index, and thousands more that they simply didn't know exist. And even the ones that we knew were important weren't being crawled as often as we needed them to. So if these issues resonate with you, I'll tell you what you can do about it. Now, the journey I'm about to share with you is the process that we followed at Snaptrip to reduce thousands of pages from our footprint. It's obviously not the only way, but it's the way that worked for us and the way that I like to work too. So first up, you need to gather data. You need to understand a full list of the pages that are out there in the ether somewhere. So you can combine lists from crawls. I've put a little asterisk there because there's a healthy little tip that I'm going to share with you in a second. Search Console, so obviously you can get exports from Search Console. You can look at link tools to understand a list of all of your legacy pages as well. And if you can get exports from your database too. But once you've got that full list of pages, make sure that you deduplicate that list so that you've got one single source of the truth. Now, that extra little tip that I said I was going to share with you, that is to make sure you use the Google Search Console API for Screaming Frog. It really is an invaluable setting for Screaming Frog because it tells you whether the pages in your crawl are indexed by Google. It tells you the date that it was last crawled, and it gives you all of that really juicy traffic information that you need too. So it's the equivalent of inspecting all of the individual URLs that are in your crawl. So if you haven't used it yet, it's well worth doing. Next, you need to align that full list of pages you've got to historical traffic figures. So I tend to use 12-month figures, but also make sure you get your clicks, impressions, your page views, average positions, conversion rates, backlink tools as well, and future potential. So by that, I mean the amount of search volume that you could potentially get for each of your pages and keywords. Now, obviously, if you've used the Screaming Frog API for Google Search Console, a lot of that work will be done for you. This will give you a really good starting point for your keep, kill, and redirect lists, which I'll come on to shortly. And there's also a really good talk after the break by Lucy Dodds, all about how to create a content audit for thousands of your pages. So make sure you're back in here after the break to see that talk for some really great tips. So even if those pages that you've got in your list are generating traffic, it's still really important to see if there's cannibalisation going on, because your traffic may be unnecessarily limited. Now, there are loads of tools that you can use to identify cannibalisation. For example, Hannah Rampton's Google Data Studio Cannibalisation Explorer. Aleda Solis's keyword mapping documents. But me, I just worked from the bottom up. So I understood which pages and which keywords I wanted to satisfy with our sites, and then I matched the best performing pages of that from our site into our ideal information architecture. And I used that based on historical traffic and backlink data, as well as conversion data. So then you can go ahead and create your keep, kill, and redirect list. And yes, this is the most laborious, but also the most satisfying part of this process. You'll need to use your own boundaries to decide what your ideal information architecture might look like. So you can use formulas, filters, formatting, Python. There are loads of different ways to try and speed it up. But it's clear that if a page is generating value, if it's got the traffic, if it's got a decent set of backlinks, and if it's got decent conversion data too, you want to keep it, and you want it to return a 200 status code. But if a page isn't generating that traffic, if there aren't any backlinks, you are safe to 404, or safe to remove it. So if you've got content duplication issues on your site, you can use permanent 301 redirects. So that's if there is any traffic or backlink data that you want to maintain, or like I said, if there's duplicate content that you can redirect to a relevant similar page. So obviously you want to make sure that that page is really relevant. So for example, when we removed our holiday cottages in Hove page, it was still maintaining some traffic and backlinks, which we wanted to maintain. So it made sense to 301 redirect that to our holiday cottages in Brighton and Hove page, because it was obviously satisfying the same user intent. But also, like I said before, don't be afraid to 404 or even 410 your page if you know that it's definitely not coming back. Because even though redirecting is a safe way to remove content, it's definitely not the only way. And there's no point redirecting everything if nobody knows that that page even existed. It's also a really unnecessary extra step, which kind of defeats the object when you're trying to streamline everything anyway. So if it's not getting traffic, if it's not converting, it's not getting backlinks, you are safe to 404. Now, it's important to say at this stage that there might be pages you personally don't want to get rid of. So a few months ago, I was clearing out my house, and I had to channel my inner Marie Kondo. And I found myself asking whether those empty water bottles that boy bands had left on stage sparked joy. They did once, but now they're just a really creepy reminder of my obsession with the boy band Blue. So I got rid of them. And maybe that's something you could do for your site too. Maybe it's the first blog post you ever wrote, or that page you created when your site was going in a completely different direction. But if those pages or that content isn't getting the traffic you wanted it to, or the backlinks, it's possibly out of date. It might be unhelpful, or people simply don't want to know what Duncan from Blue's favorite color is. It's blue, rather unoriginally. Also, a bit of a cheeky one here. So if you've got a page that isn't performing, it could be bringing your averages down. And I know average position, things like that are vanity metrics, but they are ones that business leaders do still care about. So a bit of a cheeky thing, but if you can remove it, you'll get your averages back up too. Just don't tell them I told you that. Now, if you've got your bingo cards in your swag bag, you can tick two things off right away here. So we've got a kitten and the helpful content update. And you're probably wondering how I got this far in my talk without mentioning the helpful content update, and I am too, to be honest. So Google is always trying to reward people-first content rather than search engine-first content. But the guidance here is that unhelpful content could actually damage the visibility of all of your content, not just the stuff that it considers to be unhelpful. And the guidance straight from the Google Search Console blog is actually that removing unhelpful content could help the rankings of your other content. And if that's not the best invitation for removing stuff on your site, I really don't know what is. Just a quick note here, I'm not sure how that guy's going to find anything in the forest with his world map, but never mind. The point here is sitemaps, and it's an essential piece of the journey is to update your sitemap. And I did say sitemaps plural at the start there, because yes, you want to make sure that your main sitemap is updated to only return indexable URLs that are returning a 200 status code. But you could also create another sitemap, one that's returning 301s and 404s. You can submit that to Google Search Console to crawl so that Google can understand that behavior of those changes that you've made more quickly. Then you'll need to complete some final checks once you're at that stage. So you may find that you've got some valuable content that you want to merge or transfer over from those pages that you're removing. How about your internal links? Do you still have internal links pointing to the pages that you're redirecting or removing across your sites? Once you've removed all of those pages, do you also have internal links pointing to the ones that you still want to keep? Or will removing those pages suddenly create a ton of orphan pages? It's definitely worth considering that too. If you're lucky enough to have a staging environment set up, why not make all the changes there first and then crawl that? So you can understand whether all of the behaviors that you're expecting to see have actually happened. And once you think you're ready, once you've covered everything, be brave and go ahead and make that change. This really is the sign that you've been looking for to do just that. So that's most of the hard work done and out of the way now, but it's important to keep an eye on everything and to monitor it all. So check whether Google has crawled your sitemaps. Has it picked up on the changes that you've made? Are you seeing any unexpected dips in traffic? Is there any extra tidying that you need to do? Any pages that you wish you hadn't removed, or any that you wish you had? So now's a really good time to do that monitoring and adjustments. And then that's it, surely. We can put our feet up and, yeah, SEO's done, right? Tick, all complete. Well, sadly not. We all know as SEOs there's always more to add to our to-do list. And now that we've made those changes, we've got the time to actually fully optimize the pages that we've got left. And in the interest of doing less work, let's see which site-wide changes we can make. So can we review page types and templates? Is there anything we can do about content placement? Any tags updates or anything like that? What about internal linking? Can we update the navigation? Is there anything that we need to change there? Can we add any automated or dynamic internal linking blocks so that everything's still got the page rank flowing? Is there anything that we can do to optimize our page speed? And every time I've ever needed to update page speed on my sites, it's always been because of images. So perhaps you could convert them to WebP, you could add make sure you've got a CDN set up, or simply tailor everything to your viewport and just compress those images. Is there anything that you could do to move the keywords and pages that are on page 2 of Google? Any content optimizations you can make? Any outreach that you can do to increase the number of backlinks? Any internal linking changes that you can make? What about page titles and headings? Are they fully optimized? Do they contain your target keywords? Are they enticing and descriptive? Do they actually make people want to click on them? And with fewer pages, we can actually make these changes now as part of BAU. So just as a reminder of the full process that we use to reduce the footprints on our sites, we first off considered our traffic, our backlinks, and our future potential, and we aligned that to our full list of pages. We went ahead and agreed to keep redirects and a delete list or a kill list. We completed our final checks and we changed those sitemaps and uploaded them. We were brave, we made that change. And then we continued to monitor, adjust, and optimize. So the all-important question, did it actually work for us? Well, let's see. Now, just a caveat here, yes, this is the old version of the Google Search Console coverage report. Sorry, I was trying to be good and I got everything ready months ago, but thanks, Google, for making that change. Anyway, we can see that the number of indexable pages is certainly reducing. So Google has crawled our sitemaps. It's seeing those 401s and those 301s that we've asked it to check the behavior of. But of course, what happened to our traffic? Now, it's really difficult to say, so sorry. But the clicks, impressions, average positions, and just for one of our sites is on the screen now for the past 16 months. Obviously, with seasonality, travel restrictions, the opening up of international travel, and revenge travel too, there's no obvious improvement that we can put down to the footprint alone. But isn't that great? We made thousands of changes to our sites, so we removed thousands of pages with little to no negative impact. The real benefit here is that we're now in a great position to reap the rewards of our smaller footprint. We've got the time and a bigger team now to dedicate to optimizing those fewer pages that we've got left on our site. So even if I haven't lived up to the title of my speech just yet, I'm very faithful that we will, and I'm really excited to make that happen. Thanks everyone for listening. That's me.
Need link building or content? Go to fatjoe.com. On-demand marketing services for agencies and teams. Fat Joe.